Okay, so this is the first video, an introduction into splitting the tractor. So what does that actually mean? The bottom of the tractor all along here is one set of frame elements, and it has some seams. There's a seam right there with bolts, and there's a seam over here with bolts. This is the transmission basically, and back here is known as the PTO and differential. What I'm going to do, so I went through the service manual that's made for this tractor, and it actually said to disconnect this entire piece right here and prop it up from here and here. I'm not going to do that. I went through a video that was put out by Rachel and Dan Gingell and made a little list of tasks that I'm going to do. It's pretty involved because in order to split the tractor right here, you have to remove anything that links the front to the back. So you have to remove the starter and remove the body metal up here because it connects the front to the back of the tractor. So I'm going to take I'm going to take the hood off, the whole top metal, and take off the front piece. Basically, I may not really need to do that, but I'm going to do it anyway just to keep it from getting damaged. And then it says to disconnect the tie rod, which is this thing right here. Disconnect the radius arm, which is this steering thing right here. This big giant arm. You can disconnect it back there. Remove the starter. Remove the choke and throttle linkages. Those are those little red lines right there. Disconnect the air pipe from the carburetor. It's already off because I was doing that for something else. Disconnect the wires from the alternator because they run from front to back. So they're going to be disconnected over here, and then I'll pull them back, and I have to make sure to label them so I get them back on correctly. And it just goes from there. So I'm going to make a series of videos on how I'm splitting the tractor, because why not? But check out my new muffler system bought from yesterdaystractors.com. This entire this entire black piece right here is one cast iron piece, and it's painted or something, which is really nice. And that is the intake, the air coming from the carburetor into the intake, and it's also the exhaust. That part over here takes out the exhaust and shoves it up here and goes through the muffler. And then I've not put on the muffler pipe that I bought because it's part of the removal process for splitting the tractor. So that's where we're going with that. And I'm looking forward to this process, although it's going to be a big one. Thanks. Alright, so I've removed the metal, the hood. It attached with 2 bolts down there. I had to use a wrench on the inside, wrench on the outside, 3/4 inch. And then it attaches with 4 bolts right here at the front, 2 on each side, and then 2 little bolts up at the top so that the red part stays in place and attaches to that hood. I don't need to take off the dashboard, but so I'm going to leave that there, but that's what it is. Next step is to disconnect the tie rod. Okay, so now I've removed the steering arms. There was 1 bolt up here, a castle nut at the top. Then I used a fork to get that apart, and then I can lay this back like this. Then I have a power steering arm on here, so I had to disconnect that one first. That was tricky because it just spins, and there's no end in there. So I had to disconnect that. And then there are 2 bolts holding this on right here. I've disconnected the radius arm and the tie rod and the compressor, the power steering arm. I disconnected the linkages through the throttle and the choke. I pulled the choke one all the way back out. I've disconnected the wires to the alternator. Those are back here. I labeled 3 of them, and then the 4th one actually goes all the way around the back to the coil. So you have to undo it over there and then pull it all the way back over here. It's a nice mess on mine because this tractor is really dirty. And that's apparently it for this side. So then I'm going to the other side. On the other side here, once again, I've disconnected the steering arm and the radius arm and the power steering arm. And then my power steering cables are here, and then I laid my steering arm back there. And now I'm going to get ready to remove the hydraulic pump right there Also then supposed to do the battery tray. So that's what I'm on to next. Okay, so I've removed the hydraulic pump. You can just make out the little gear entry right there. And then I removed the hydraulic manifold. It goes down from the pump down underneath there. The next things to do are to remove the battery tray, which is right there, and then put the hoist on. So that's where I'm going. Okay, so I've set up my hoist. I got it on 1.5 ton setting because I don't think even this end of it is 1.5 tons. And then I've blocked underneath the transmission there. I actually lifted up the tractor itself from the front end there and dropped it on those blocks so I knew it would be tall enough and strong enough. So right now the weight is partially resting on the wood and partially it's kind of on the hoist, kind of not. And it's ready to start undoing the bolts that hold the tractor together. That's where we are.